I also want to acknowledge the Kari singers. It was quite an emotional performance, and music always, I think, feeds the soul, and particularly in an environment like this, which in business, I think sometimes we can get caught up with the money side of things that can often feel a bit emotionless, but then you have performances like this that show us why we're here and we have the passions that we do. And I would also say to Liz Hughes from NIDA that they say politics is show business for ugly people. So if I don't win my pre-selection in 7 years' time, I'll be looking out for you. I, of course, want to pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past and present and acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I also want to particularly acknowledge emerging Aboriginal leaders on whose shoulders rests a significant responsibility. As the youngest Liberal woman to serve in the Legislative Council, I believe that the perspective and enthusiasm of my generation is a force to be reckoned with and excited by. I also acknowledge, of course, my parliamentary colleague, Minister Harris. It's wonderful to sit side by side with you in wanting to ensure the promotion of reconciliation, and thank you for being such a gracious recipient of my grilling at budget estimates. We all do our jobs to make sure we're doing the best possible work we can for the people of New South Wales. Of course, Councillor Yvonne Weldon, AM, always such a powerful speaker. Thank you for your words and your actions. And Paul Nicolau, of course, as our host, thank you very much for keeping us entertained, perhaps not on time exactly. And, of course, all the community and business leaders here today. There are many to mention, and I think hopefully almost all of you have been acknowledged in some way or another, but thank you so much for your commitment and the work that you do in this space. I'm honoured to be representing the Honourable Leslie Williams, MP, the Shadow Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, and also, of course, the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Mark, or the Honourable Mark Speakman, SC MP, my boss. The significant responsibility for reconciliation is one that, at its core, requires a shared sense of responsibility and commitment to action. Amongst the long hours, the endless emails, the myriad meetings that we manage to cram in because we believe in the service of business and the benefits of prosperity, we should all stop to question once in a while what reconciliation means. I believe that we can prove Marshall Langton wrong on her declaration that reconciliation is dead. I've seen that there can be a tendency to think that reconciliation is not about me or that it doesn't affect me. Perhaps it's a version of the bystander effect. Yet, as a Liberal, I believe, as Senator Andrew Bragg writes in his book Baraja, The Liberal Case for National Reconciliation, that Australian liberalism promotes freedom, individual agency, tolerance and the private economy, which allows people to rise as far as their talents will take them. As part of our social contract, it is up to all of us to contribute to an environment that fosters those principles. That is reconciliation, incorporating truth and overcoming the torment of powerlessness. Others will say that there is an unfairness to affirmative action or focused efforts to help a particular group of people. During my time working as a media advisor in the marriage equality campaign, polling was of course undertaken to determine the right messaging strategy to see a successful outcome. There were questions about what resonated with Australians. Was it the American Disney story of a happily ever after, a sort of love is love message? Was it going to hit people right in the feels? Resoundingly no. Instead, it was the idea of fairness. The idea that we should all have an opportunity to have a go at marriage, no matter who we were. Australians love to think of Australia as a fair place. But as the Business Growth Roadmap reveals, Aboriginal people make up less than 1% of business owners, while representing 3.4% of the general population. So this is where business is crucial to reconciliation, to ensure that Australia is a fair place for people seeking to contribute, to be responsible, to flourish, that Aboriginal culture and representation is a part of all aspects of our society. Last year, I spoke passionately in favour of a voice to Parliament because I strongly believe that it solidified an ardent desire of many Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders to be responsible for the future of their people and this nation in a rich and sometimes terrible cultural context. It It is clear that there is a stark and unacceptable divide between the opportunities and outcomes of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. The historical abuse of Aboriginal people has led to a deeply unfair set of life circumstances for so many. Economic empowerment is a part of this path of responsibility and freedom. It is why, when in government, the Coalition introduced the Aboriginal procurement policy and far surpassed the targets originally set, including 694 contracts awarded to Indigenous businesses in financial year 21-22 at a value of $480 million. But there is, of course, more to be done to refine these programs, and the Minister, of course, will be responsible for responding to the policy review, which was released in September last year. I can ask you some questions in budget estimates about those. We know, of course, that Target 8 of the National Closing the Gap goals deals with employment, and we know that so much flows from freedom through finance. Sustainable enfranchisement requires financial stability. In New South Wales in 2021, the proposition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people between 25 and 64 years of age who were employed, the proportion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people between 25 and 64 years of age who were employed sat at 59.6%. This is increasing from a baseline of 54.6% and on the way to achieving the target of 62%. But let's note that the rate of employment for non-Indigenous people sits at 75.2%. So there is still much to be done to work towards parity. To address these out-of-the-ordinary imbalances requires extraordinary work. It requires change from all participants to rewrite the social contract between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. This is an issue that crosses political divides, and I thank the Minister for your gracious acknowledgement of some of the great work that the Coalition government did when we were in power. It is a place that you'll find collaboration from governments and oppositions with a commitment to outcomes despite what sometimes seems like a glacial pace of change. There is currently a parliamentary inquiry into the social impacts of government procurement processes, which will obviously have some recommendations that relate to this area of procurement, and obviously organisations like Supply Nation are very important to that process. And there are many streams of change. I want to acknowledge Thunder Labs. Adam Long, a millennial founder of Thunder Labs, works with clients to undertake digital transformation and cybersecurity projects, and he decided to set up a dedicated tech apprenticeship program for high school graduates in cohorts underrepresented in the industry. The company specifically invited Indigenous Australians to join the company straight out of high school to enjoy a salary, paid training, mentoring, and real-world experience to become a junior developer after just 1 year. Thunder Labs are learning to refine their program, and I'm sure they'd be very willing to share any experience should there be any business leaders here today who would like to take up such a program. They are just one example of how businesses can live their values through action. And although not in New South Wales, Daniel Joinby, another millennial and a proud Gungardji man, has the goal of getting more First Nations people involved in the space industry, setting up Australia's only Indigenous space consultancy firm, the incredibly successful Gungardji Aerospace. And this is something that is really world-leading in its approach, and I really encourage you to check them out if you have a chance, and particularly if you're in that industry, space and defence. These are real and exciting opportunities that naturally build reconciliation through action and empowerment, and will lead our country to greater prosperity. I want to also acknowledge another side of the story about individual empowerment. I want to mention the story of a mentor of mine, the late Mr. Harold Hunt OAM, who was a remarkable man who grew up in the remote corner country of New South Wales. He overcame his own demons of alcoholism and many run-ins with the law to become Australia's second Aboriginal probation and parole officer, and then an esteemed drug and alcohol counsellor with the Health Commission. Using his professional knowledge and the experience that he'd gained through life, he lectured at the Goulburn Police Academy and Charles Sturt University in Dubbo, earning his Order of Australia in 2014 in recognition of his work. And he used to joke that he was essentially entitled to an OAM because it stood for Old Aboriginal Man. And his life demonstrates the kind of change that's possible with dedicated mentorship and the courage to persist even when the odds are stacked against you. Just a few weeks ago, I visited Rainbow Lodge in Glebe, and you might have seen the recent Four Corners episode about their incredible life-changing work. And I believe the Minister also visited them and contributed to some of their planning for the future, which is fantastic. It's an organisation that facilitates the rehabilitation of men coming out of prison with a strong representation of Aboriginal men to rejoin free society with a sense of hope and purpose. And they partner with companies who then go on to employ the men who have graduated through their programs. And it's a model of care that has been most successful and more successful than most. Its head, Claude Robinson, knows the impact of intensive one-on-one compassionate care that develops in people the capacity to become contributing, functional members of society, just as he did. There is hope, and all boats should rise on a rising tide. We have to be ready for change. It takes hard, dedicated work. It requires courage and responsibility, because reconciliation is a living concept. It is not an academic one. It is not just a plan, it is action. Reconciliation in action is required for progress, and I commend all of you for being here today and for your commitment to change.